This is Laura Eric, Vice President of Public Policy for the New York State Association of Healthcare Providers. In this presentation, we will demystify New York's budget and legislative sessions. You'll learn who's who in New York State government, how the state's budget is made, and the basics of legislative bills. I'll also give you some Albany-specific vocabulary to help you as you navigate Planet Albany. Let's start with who's who in the executive branch. Only 4 statewide government officers are directly elected: the governor and lieutenant governor, the attorney general, and the comptroller. With a few exceptions, the governor appoints the heads of all state departments and agencies of the executive branch. Now let's take a look at the legislative branch. New York's legislature is bicameral. The lower house, also known as the People's House or the Assembly, is led by Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie. Each of the 150 districts is represented by an Assembly member. The upper house, or the Senate, is led by Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart Cousins. Each of 63 districts is represented by a senator. Legislative terms in both houses are for 2 years and have no term limits. At present, there is a Democratic majority in both houses, with 102 Democrats in the Assembly and 42 in the Senate. The lieutenant governor is the ex officio president of the Senate and can cast a vote in the event of a tie, but cannot otherwise vote. While most of our attention is focused on parts 3 and 4 in this graphic, it's important to understand the full state budget cycle. Budget preparation varies by agency. Typically, the process begins at the program level where staff draft individual requests. Agency heads may hold internal meetings to review budgetary needs. Though agencies start analyzing budgets as early as May or June, the formal process begins when the budget director, Blake Washington, issues a call letter outlining the governor's priorities and expected fiscal constraints. By early fall, agencies finalize budget packages in line with the call letter, submitting them to the Division of Budget. The division analyzes these requests, seeking clarification as needed and determining funding for ongoing programs by October. In November, the budget director holds formal hearings with agency heads, the governor's office, and legislative representatives to discuss requests and priorities. Through late November, examiners refine agency requests into preliminary recommendations, draft appropriation bills, and reassess economic projections for the financial plan. The governor's staff, who are also preparing the annual State of the State address to the legislature, work with the division throughout the development of the budget. By early December, the division presents these recommendations to the governor, who works with budget staff to finalize the executive budget. Meetings between the governor and the Division of Budget address major fiscal and policy issues, leading to final revisions in agency budgets. The next step is for the legislature to perform its role in making the state budget. Here's a brief overview of the New York State legislative calendar. There are 2 distinct periods within the legislative year. The first part is the state budget, which runs from January until April 1st, after which is the legislative session, which runs usually until early June. The governor delivers the State of the State address in early January, marking the start of the legislature's budget season and outlining key executive priorities for the year. By mid-January, or by February 1st, following a gubernatorial election, the governor submits the executive budget proposal to the legislature. This includes appropriation, revenue, and budget bills, along with the state's 5-year financial plan, 5-year capital program, and related financial information. The governor can also submit amendments within 30 days. From January through mid-March, both legislative houses review the executive budget and hold public hearings. The Senate and Assembly each develop one-house budgets reflecting their respective priorities. In mid to late March, the governor, the Senate Majority Leader, and Assembly Speaker negotiate the details of the final state budget, often behind closed doors. This has traditionally been known as 3 men in a room, but it hasn't been 3 men in quite a while. The governor then revises the proposal, which is voted on by the legislature. If no agreement is reached, the governor may submit an emergency appropriations bill to keep the government operating temporarily. Lawmakers are not paid during an emergency temporary spending period like this. The legislature must pass the budget by April 1st, the start of the state's new fiscal year. Bills with fiscal implications have to be taken up during the budget session, while non-fiscal bills are addressed between April and the end of session in June. The legislative session operates on a 2-year cycle, and bills not passed within this period must be reintroduced when the new session begins. Lawmakers typically meet 2 to 4 days a week, and Tuesdays are frequently busy days at the Capitol, with lots of lobbying activities and days of action. The legislative calendar is front-loaded, and a delayed budget can shorten the session unless lawmakers extend their time in Albany. The final days of each session are often long, running into the late night or the very early hours. Both houses live stream committee, budget, and legislative activities on their websites. Budget bills in New York fall into 2 categories. Appropriations authorizes spending, while Article 7 bills set the parameters related to that spending. Debt service is an appropriation bill that allows New York to pay its debt service, and is usually approved unanimously and without debate. Legislature and Judiciary bill, also known as Leg and Judy, funds New York's Assembly and Senate as well as the judiciary. It's frequently approved last, lest legislators be accused of approving their own pay before other programs are settled. Aid to localities authorizes large lump sum appropriations for school aid and Medicaid, as well as other programs by which state tax money is sent to local government entities. Capital projects includes funding for capital projects, most of which are bonded. State operations is an appropriation that authorizes funding for state agencies and the programs that they carry out. Moving along to Article 7 bills, Health and Mental Hygiene, also known as HMH, sets policy for health programs. TEDdy sets policy for transportation, economic development, and the environment. The Public Protection and General Government Bill, also known as PPGG, sets policy on public safety programs as well as other actions relating to local government. ELFA, or the Education, Labor, and Family Bill, includes policy regarding welfare, primary, secondary, and higher education. And of course, revenue contains language regarding taxes and fees. All bills follow the same format. I hope that this presentation will help you understand the basics of reading a legislative bill. Every bill, whether it's a budget bill or a legislative bill, will have the number, the version, and the sponsor at the top of the page. Bills that have an A originate in the Assembly, and S bills originate in the Senate. When both numbers appear together, they're known as same as or companion bill. Every bill will have a title that briefly describes what the bill does. Bills conclude with the date that that bill is in effect. So let's look at an example of a bill. This is Senate Bill 9901, introduced by Senator Rivera. Any bill that amends or repeals existing law must reference the relevant part of law. Anything new or to be added or inserted into existing law is underscored, while anything to be omitted is struck through. When any existing law or part of law is proposed to be repealed, the word repealed is printed in red bold-faced type. Every bill that has a fiscal implication to the state will include a fiscal impact note at the bottom of the bill. Each bill is accompanied by a sponsor's memo, which includes the bill number, the sponsor, the title of the bill, the purpose or general idea of the bill, a summary of the bill's specific provisions, a statement justifying the need for the bill, any prior legislative history, any fiscal implications, and finally, the effective date. In the 23-24 two-year legislative session, more than 24,000 bills were introduced. Of those, less than 1,000 became law, and just over 100 were vetoed. So how does a bill become a law? First, an idea for a bill is submitted to the Bill Drafting Commission, where it is translated into formal language. Then the legislation is introduced by its sponsor and assigned a bill number. The bill is assigned to an appropriate committee for discussion and analysis. If a majority of members on the committee support it, the bill is reported to the floor or advanced to the next appropriate committee. If the bill does not advance, it is said to have died in committee. All bills requiring an expenditure of state funds must go through the Assembly Ways and Means Committee or the Senate Finance Committee. They make sure that the state can afford the cost of the bill. Bills cannot reach the floor for a vote unless Ways and Means or Senate Finance okays the expenditure. Similarly, bills which impose criminal or civil sanctions must go before the Codes Committee. A final version of the bill must age for at least 3 days before being voted on, unless the governor authorizes and the legislature accepts a message of necessity for that bill. The bill then reaches the floor for a debate and is voted on. If a bill passes in one house, it is sent on to the other house where it goes through the same process. Often, both the Senate and Assembly are working simultaneously on same-as or companion bills. If both houses pass a bill, it is then sent on to the governor for her signature. The governor can sign a bill into law, veto it, or give it a pocket approval, which means that the governor fails to act on a bill within 10 days of receiving it, and the bill is automatically approved. If the governor vetoes a bill, it can still become a law if a 2/3 majority of both houses votes in favor of the bill. This is known as an override. Once signed by the governor, the bill becomes law. Albany's political culture has developed its own vocabulary and word use. If you don't know what the big ugly is, if you fear the Medicaid glob or are awaiting the mothership, or if you aren't sure what a Lulu is, take some time to familiarize yourself with the vocabulary on these 3 slides. Before you know it, you'll be speaking Albanian like a seasoned political veteran. Albanian is the tongue-in-cheek demonym for people from planet Albany and for the oddly specific language used in legislative circles. We hope you found this presentation helpful. HCP's public policy team is here to assist you with policy and regulatory questions, so reach out to us anytime. Connect with us by email at publicpolicy@nyshcp.org. Our individual contact information is also included on this slide. This presentation is the sole property of HCP, and any unauthorized use or distribution is, of course, strictly prohibited.